It's a fractal universe, isn't it? This is water crystal for thank you. Thanks for being here. I'm especially honored to have Mas here playing music. Great surprise, Pepper Proud just walked in, so Pepper, would you sing a little? Thank you, Pepper. Moss. I had my eyes closed that whole time, but this video is rather crazy. There's this Earth model called Expanding Earth. Science would say it's absolutely ridiculous. But the idea is that the Earth has been expanding for some time. And sure enough, if you start subtracting from the globe the newest Earth first, that's coming out of the deep rifts in the Atlantic and Pacific, and go outward from there, not only does the Pangea theory work, where South America fits perfectly with Africa, but the whole Earth slowly collapses into about 50% of its size, and everything fits together. It's really wild. If you search Expanding Earth theory, you can watch it in depth at some point. So if this is true, and I'm not saying it is, then we're growing. But where did it all come from? And I feel that if this is true, then at some point it must have been absolutely covered in water. And in the beginning was the water. We hear this in so many different creation myths, the Iroquois and the Chinese and the Bible, and all over the place. Is it talking about the primordial soup from which we were born, as science tells us? Is it talking about the time when we lived in our mother's water? Well, Pisces is about water, and it's about merging the interconnection that we all share. There's many mysteries in the water. This is Dwapara, underwater, the city that Lord Vishnu was said to have left. And Yonaguni, off the coast of Japan. Scientists are telling us that these are natural formations, that no city could be that deep, but if the waters did indeed take over the coastlines by 400 feet plus, as science tells us, why would the coastal cities not be underwater now? And we find amazing artifacts from these dives. It's another picture of Yonaguni. Pyramids off the coast of Florida. Sinkholes in the Yucatan, the Mayan land, that seem to lead the endless journey into the underworld, the inside. This is Lake Titicaca between Bolivia and Peru. 12,000 plus feet above sea level, this massive lake, where legend has it spaceships sometimes fly out of the waters. Above, on a mountain above Lake Titicaca, Tiahuanaco, Umapunku, maybe the oldest site we've found. Credited to the Incas, but this was long before the Incas and long before we told it exists. And in the Inca creation myths, this is where it all began. And oddly enough, there's been a dock excavated, almost 20,000 feet above sea level, a dock. The earth has changed a lot. Off the coast of Cuba, Castro sent scientists after sunken treasure, and they found a lot of it. And they also found this with sonar, computer representations of that, and more. A pyramid 4 times the size of the Great Pyramid in Giza, 2,500 feet underwater. It's impossible. Well, there are many, many water stories of old. But we left last time in the middle of a story, so I'd like to pick up there. Where were we? In this story, Prometheus is the one who created us. He did so out of clay. In the image of the gods, this great gift he gave to us, which I would say means that we ourselves are creators and always moldable. He gave us something else. Something to set us apart from the animals of the kingdom, something to keep the potential predators at bay, something to warm our homes and cook our food, something Zeus had mandated not be given to Earth this time around. He gave to us fire. He had a special relationship with Artemis, and she snuck him in through a back door of Olympus, away from the ever-watchful gaze of Father Zeus. And while Helios, Apollo, the god of the sun, slept, Prometheus lit a torch from its flames. He stole fire from the gods to bring to us his creation, human. And he was punished severely. He was chained in unbreakable adamantine links to a lonely crag of the Caucasus, where he would be forced to suffer the blistering heat of day and the freezing cold of night for eternity. Or until he apologized. Zeus allowed him to enjoy this torment for a time, and then sent his messenger, Mercury, Hermes, to retrieve these words of atonement. But Prometheus, ever the rebel, ever the revolutionary, and standing fast in his rightful decision to give this creation to his creation, would not apologize. He said, Hermes, you go back and tell that guy in the sky he might as well wait for the crest of the wave not to break before he hears any such nonsense from these lips. You can imagine Zeus was not so happy with this message. The conditions of Prometheus's torture were increased significantly. Now, during the blistering hot days, a vulture, or some say a red eagle, was sent to slowly and quite painfully peck the liver from Prometheus's side. And during the freezing cold nights, it would regenerate so it could be pecked anew the next day. This for an eternity, or until he apologized. But he would not. This time he tried the bargaining chip. Mercury, you tell Zeus, my gifts of foresight, and he knows me to be the wisest titan, the most gifted prophet. These gifts have allowed me to foresee a woman who will give birth to a child strong enough to take the kingdom from the father. And only I know her identity. What riddle was this? Zeus entertained, would not cave in. He assumed this child would be a child of his. After all, he took the kingdom from his father Saturn, as his father Saturn had taken the kingdom from his father Uranus. But he knew that Prometheus would budge after some time, so again Mercury returned. No dice, Prometheus. Now, if you ever wish to see the light of day that doesn't tan your hide while a vulture picks the liver from your side, you will apologize. You will reveal the name of this mystery woman. And since you're being such a smartass, an immortal must choose to take your place. Now, what immortal would do such a thing, to give up their beautiful life for an eternity of suffering? There was one. Unlike, well, actually just like his son Zeus, Saturn was no stranger to extramarital affair. And like Zeus's wife Hera, Saturn's wife Rhea was not so fond of this inclination. She caught Saturn in the act one time as he found a beautiful woman named Philara. And as he was about to get busted, he took the form of a horse to hide. And Philara gave birth then to a centaur, half horse, half man, a centaur named Chiron, who, unlike the many centaurs to follow, was not some hedonistic belligerent drunk. No, Chiron was the wisest mentor known to the Greek myths. He was educated by Artemis and Apollo, the moon and the sun themselves, and the who's who of Greek heroes made their way through his school, the Chironian, where he taught martial arts. So Hercules and Achilles, Jason. These were students of Chiron's. In fact, he raised Jason. But he also taught healing. Asclepius, the greatest known Greek healer, was a student of Chiron's, and he taught astrology and astronomy and mathematics and logic and reason and architecture and all the goods. He was a gifted artist, Chiron. He taught music. And Orpheus, the greatest known mortal musician, was a student of his. One day, having returned from the quest for the Golden Fleece with Jason and the Argonauts, Orpheus fell in love with a beautiful nymph, Eurydice. And when he was to be married, Chiron knew it was party time. He said, "All right, Hercules, break out that wine of the gods I've had you guard for so long." Well, big mistake, because the corks popped and the sweet, godly nectar drifted through the air and found its way to the nostrils of the many other centaurs who came and crashed the wedding. And they got trashed. Now, the humans tolerated their belligerence for some time until one committed the ultimate wedding crime. He snatched the bride Eurydice from the ground and galloped away with her. That is, until an arrow from the bow of Hercules found the centaur's heart. He dropped the bride, and he dropped dead. And a great battle ensued between man and centaur. Now, Chiron was not involved. I mean, what side would he take? He's a centaur, but his students are the humans, and he's too wise for that nonsense anyway. So he stood on the sidelines watching his students engage in the martial arts. But he became involved involuntarily. One of the last arrows of this battle missed its mark and nearly caught Chiron in the neck. But he caught the arrow in thin air, fortunately. Quite fortunately, because it was shot again from the bow of Hercules, and it was an arrow tipped in the deadliest poison known to man, a poison that Chiron himself taught Hercules to fashion from the blood of the Hydra. The battle ended, the humans victorious, and something strange happened, something magical, something synchronistic, maybe even serendipitous. Chiron dropped this arrow, and before it found mark in the land below, it pierced his leg. The deadliest poison known to man mingled with the blood of the great centaur Mentor. But he couldn't die. He's half immortal, son of Saturn, but half mortal, so he could feel pain. And did he ever? Excruciating pain. His students, these greatest healers, rushed to his aid, but none could help him, not even Asclepius, who was known to have raised the dead. And he could not help himself. And for weeks he writhed in this agony. In this time he developed many new healing modalities, and we have him to thank for that. But none saved him. However, he developed something else, something new, something previously unknown to the gods. He developed empathy. He now knew what the suffering of this human condition is all about. And this empathy grew and grew until it was enough to encompass the pain of the broken heart. It grew and grew until it felt the loss of a mother whose child dies in battle. It grew and it grew and it grew until it was enough to encompass the pain of he who was most tortured, and this, of course, was Prometheus. Chiron told his half-brother Zeus, he said, "I will take his place. I will take his place." Prometheus was released 400 years after he was first chained. It said Hercules broke those unbreakable chains as only he could and fired an arrow through that red eagle. Well, he must have apologized. He must have revealed the name of this mystery woman. The myths don't say, but I have a hunch. Prometheus was released, but Chiron was not forced to take his place. Zeus honored this empathy, this gift that Chiron gave to the gods and to the world. And while Prometheus was released, Chiron was stationed after being allowed to die a graceful, mortal death, ever in the heavens as the constellation Centaurus, and later repositioned to Sagittarius when Centaurus was lost from the northern hemisphere's view due to the precession of the equinoxes. The Centaur, Chiron. But the poster said Neptune. So let's talk about this strange blue planet at the edge of our solar system. The dot you see here is Neptune's moon Triton. Triton, who was a son of Neptune, of Poseidon. And it's a freaky ass moon. Here are the moons of our solar system. The 5 huge ones in the middle are Zeus's, Jupiter's, and one of Saturn's. On the left, the Earth's moon, which is the freakiest thing happening. And the large one on the right above the Earth, well, this is Triton. Very large in size, considering Neptune is not nearly the size of the greater gas giants Jupiter and Saturn. Triton is an icy world, a world of water, meaning this condition our scientists say is necessary for life. Here's an image of Triton himself with a conch shell, riding in the Ouroboros, the snake who eats its tail, the snake we see in our night sky, the Milky Way. Said to have been represented by Leviathan in the Hebrew mythos, but in the Greek it was ruled by Okeanos, god of the great river that surrounds us all. And as pleasant as Neptune looks in this photo, his mythology does not necessarily agree with what we feel Neptune is all about in astrology, what Pisces is all about in astrology, because they're very closely linked. Even with his halo and his horses, or with his horse fish. Maybe this is where that sea goat comes from, but what the hell is a sea goat? Even when he's pulled by dolphins, he doesn't quite qualify. No, it seems these mysteries are much more feminine. Are they related to the mermaids? Well, not the sirens, that's for sure. Maybe Yamanja, Oshun. But Mary, Ma, Mar, Sea. Here's an image from Chartres Cathedral in France, where many mysteries live, of the Pisces fish tied together. What's with that? Well, a goddess who was born of the sea, Aphrodite, Venus, goddess of love, born from the blood of castrated Uranus, merging with the waters of the ocean. She and her son, Eros, Cupid, to escape the greatest monster, Typhon, are said to have taken the form of fish and sprang into the Euphrates River, and that they tied themselves together so they would not be lost. Okay. Strange that, but I like this image of the fish being tied together, for we're all tied together. And this is the nature of Pisces, the nature of Neptune. It's merging. It's the interconnectedness that we all feel. And I should say this, that this planet, Neptune, discovered in 1846, was the second non-visible planet discovered. The first in 1781 was Uranus, and that by William Herschel with a telescope. but Neptune was first mathematically calculated. And I'm not saying Neptune's about math. But this story tells us that we can witness these effects that we have on one another gravitationally, electromagnetically, through this thing called love. And Neptune is about this merging the seas. In shallow men, the fish of little thoughts caused much commotion. In oceanic minds, the whales of inspiration make hardly a ruffle. Hindu scripture. And Neptune's about inspiration as well. Neptune, traditionally the 12th house on the wheel, it's the last house. This is the place of the soul's transcendence, the return to source, the interconnection with all that is swimming in the spiritual soup, if you will. So it's this place of spirit, this opening of the spirit world. And it's about healing, this bond we feel with one another, this empathy, our healing hands, and our love. And we need it now, because this great boxing match called the Pluto-Uranus square is going on in the world, and a lot of commotion. Uranus, Pluto in some ways duking it out, and Neptune right in the middle of the thing. Here's a chart of the new moon from March 1st. Sun and moon down here, right with Neptune and Chiron, while Uranus squares Pluto. So here in the middle we have these great healers, Chiron the shaman healer, and Neptune the celestial empathic healer, helping us make sure that this revolution of this time is a spiritual one, a one of awakening, and that's kind of how Neptune rolls. So many of the humans are awakening. Awesome, isn't it? You know, these guys aren't allowed to be harnessed by Neptune in India anymore because they have been given rights as citizens. Awesome. So Neptune can be about spiritual awakenings. I'll give you an example using my favorite client. His name is me. This is my chart. Here it is with the Earth in the middle, so those freaky lines don't confuse us all. Circled on the left is the planet Neptune, which is right at my descendant when I was born. And my south node in the 12th house, the house of Neptune, says that it's a special planet to me. But I didn't know that till recently. I didn't know that till it came in to help an aspect of my chart called a trine. On the left, Mars, an almost perfect trine, 120-degree aspect to my Sun, Uranus conjunction. Well, Jupiter came through in Capricorn to oppose my natal Cancer Mars in 2009. And pardon my language, but fuck, that was kind of a mess. And to pick up the pieces came Neptune. Neptune moving into Pisces to complete a grand water trine in my chart. And this is, well, when I found spirit, something I always thought was scientifically absurd. But shortly thereafter, Uranus came through to square my Mars. Pardon my language. Well, this time I'll spare it, but this was one of the worst days of my life. But also an initiation, a starting point. I was awakening, and I had an opportunity to go back to sleep, and Neptune then, after going retrograde, came back direct to bring this grand trine and make sure that I wouldn't snore or dream for too long, and to make sure those dreams were productive. And sometimes, Sean, dreaming is best in the darkness. And Neptune transits, for many of my clients, I send them to this guy's place.
Hey, look, there's moss.
That one, right? Cool.
So I'm deeply touched and honored to chime in for just a few minutes about the power of water and the giant impact that it has on many people's lives day in and day out. This is Float Seattle. This is a sensory deprivation tank center over in Green Lake, and I'm just going to speak for a few minutes on the power of salt water and the transformational processes that occur when you're completely closed off from the outside world, floating weightlessly in very, very salty water. And some of you in this room are very familiar with this, and others are not. So this is a float tank, and you crawl in there and you float suspended on 10 inches of Epsom salt water with 1,000 pounds of salt in it. We also add halide crystal salt for the electrolytes and the minerals that are absorbed through the body. And you float in there or in there for an hour. And for some, it may be a bit spooky. And for others, it's just strangely amazing. It's a lot like floating in outer space. It's not claustrophobic. The expanse inside the tank seems infinite. When you get in and get settled and get past the point that you're floating naked in some tank in Green Lake, things open up and you've got nowhere to go because it's just you floating in salt water. And I tend to think that we see things more clearly in the dark. The practice, the ritual of showering before you step into a float tank and float for an hour for rest for your body, traction on your back, reduction of swelling and inflammation around your body, for the increase in circulation, for the traction of your back, for the introspection and solitude and isolation that's achieved effortlessly in a float tank, suspended weightlessly in the dark, is a pretty transformative practice. And for those of you familiar with blissful meditations in the seated posture, this is a blissful meditation in a lay down posture, sort of like what Brett is doing over there.
This isn't bliss, man.
It's sort of a watery shavasana. This is taken from the St. Gregory convent in Greek, and what this says is know thyself. And what this means to I thought it was really cool. I saw this skeleton guy, and he may be on a bed of nails or water or a bed or whatever, but it fit really nicely. And for some folks, know thyself means have self-confidence and know who you are, but what I really think it means is to know thyself. You are more interconnected with your brothers and sisters, and more interconnected with the cosmos when you go deep within, when you step inside yourself, when you don't have a choice, when you're closed off from the outside world and you have nowhere to go but deep within yourself in this practice. It's a really beautiful and profound thing. And for some, it happens really quickly, and for others, it takes a minute. But the key is the fact that you're harnessing the power of very, very salty water, just like this guy may be doing. And I also think a little bit about the hermit from the tarot, and the fact that when you are spending time with yourself, you get these great insights. This awakening, this inspiration occurs when you are more in touch with yourself. And as you know, water is a crystalline structure. This is an ice cube that's melting very slowly. Water and salt, essential elements, profoundly imprintable, imbuable. Is that a word?
Yes.
It is?
Why not?
Sweet. You have the power and the ability to look deep within yourself, suspended weightlessly, bathing in crystals, which I think is pretty cool. That's most of it. If you're interested in learning more, it's Float Seattle. I'm going to be here, and for Brett and the work that he does, this is a really cool way to go deep within. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah. We did. Yeah.
Is it still happening, Sean?
It's still happening. We're gonna
There's a float group on.
next month. It's $39 for your first float, and it's so worth it. And if you're lucky enough, moss will work.
Yeah.
Go Tuesdays or Thursday nights, and you'll see moss.
An amazing place, and often when people come to me for readings and they're in the midst of a Neptune transit, which to me it's like, hey, the importance of your dream is actually even more significant right now. Pay attention, journal them, dance them, sing them, and go float. And so I send a lot of people to Sean's, and I've had a lot of amazing openings at this place. Openings. Neptune, Pisces, there's this kind of blast off into the world of spirit when we allow it. And well, that can be a kind of strange thing. We look up and everything's changed. Suddenly the city lights and the clouds go away. I wish. Or we can find ourselves to places where we can see the stars, but not like we used to. But we have a couple options when we look up to sites like this. We can feel really, really small. Or we can know that we are part of it all, that we are all connected. And if it's all huge, then we are huge. Know thyself, as within, so without. Sean reminded me I wanted to read a quote from one of my favorite teachers who's recently found me from the other side, the great sage Alan Watts. Now, this is terribly important. Really, the fundamental, ultimate mystery, the only thing you need to know to understand the deepest metaphysical secrets is this: that for every outside, there is an inside, and for every inside, there is an outside. And although they are different, they go together. There is, in other words, a secret conspiracy between all insides and all outsides. And the conspiracy is to look as different as possible and yet underneath to be identical. You do not find one without the other. Just like Tweedledee and Tweedledum agreed to have a battle. As within, so without. It's so huge because you are. So Pisces and Neptune, there's this place of meditation. I realized I didn't have slides for it, but it's also this place of poetry and dreams and song, because I brought this living slide named Moss. So sometimes this 12th house, this transcendence, this highest place of spirituality, is related to Guru, but better yet, Bodhisattva, who reaches enlightenment but chooses to stick around to help us find ours, because Pisces is this healer, this empath, this giver. So Gandhi, here's an image, a man who was around not long after the time that Neptune was discovered. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Then maybe one day we will all remember that we're the same. Mother Teresa, Cancer has this thing about my child, and it's beautiful. But for Pisces, it's all the world's children are my children. Even the rich are hungry for love, for being cared for being wanted, for having someone to call their own. For us to truly merge and connect, there's no us and them, there's no 99% and 1%. We have to realize that even the seemingly terribly dark ones are here for a reason, for our reason, and that we're doing this together. So this shaman healer, Chiron, this strange rock in our solar system, discovered in 1977, with a very eccentric orbit. Well, he was an eccentric guy. This centaur. And I love this story of Chiron and Prometheus. I often tell it to people who are, well, in strongly Piscean times. And if you have a personal planet within the range of, say, 4 to 8 degrees, Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, or Sagittarius, you're now enjoying a dance with Neptune, or soon will. All of the archetypes have their light and shadow, and they are all us. There's no I'm a Pisces and I'm a Scorpio and I'm a Taurus in my book. We are all the sun signs. We are all the signs. So on one side of Pisces in the light is this empathic merging, this healing, this loving sacrifice. And on the other side, straight up martyrdom, nailing yourself to a cross while no souls are saved. And we do this sometimes. And we carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, Atlas style. And who does that serve? We're coached to be eternally selfless so that we can make it to heaven. Well, that's kind of selfish, isn't it? And know thyself means that sometimes we have to put the healing hands to rest and work on our own system for a time. So sometimes it's necessary to find the on-off switch. And in my astrological practice more and more, I find that one of the things I'm here to most give is the teachings around psychic protection. We have this empathy. It's open. We love each other. We feel our hearts. We actually have very real scientific electromagnetic connection if we need to go there, but we don't. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's beautiful to feel another's pain. But not if you're going to keep it. You know, there's great snake men who can suck the venom from your snake bite and purge it. But it's wise to not try that if you don't know the purging thing. And sometimes we do this. And sometimes we avoid our own emotional authenticity by healing others. It can be a great escape. So the off switch, learning this inner technology, which we all have, of turning this on and off, of protecting ourselves by our sheer will. I find it more and more necessary, especially in these changing, dynamic, somewhat crazy-ass times. All right, so Chiron, with this strange orbit that brings this rock called a centaur, sometimes outside of the orbit of Uranus, sometimes all the way inside the orbit of Saturn, but usually between Saturn and Uranus, like it is now. Did anyone else spend like 2 hours on JPL's website tracking planetary orbits yesterday? I'm the only guy.
No, it's your job, yeah.
Yeah. And so you look at a bunch of numbers like this, and what this is saying actually is that Chiron now is heading out to its furthest reaches. So Chiron is now out with Uranus. So this red circle shows this, that sometimes Chiron crosses between Uranus and Neptune, and sometimes between Saturn and Jupiter, but usually between Saturn and Uranus, and therefore Chiron is usually called the Rainbow Bridge, this bridge between the outer planets, the generational planets, the worldly planets, and the personal planets, the inner planets. But now very close to Uranus, and on its way to maybe bring the messages of the world out to Neptune. Because they're in it together. Here again is that March 1st Pisces new moon, which almost perfectly trined Jupiter in the Jupiter-Uranus-Pluto T-square, you know. Neptune and Chiron right there with this Pisces new moon. This happened in 2012 as well, but it's been a long time before then it will be a long time before it happens again. So what a gift to have these healers in the sign of healing and spirituality at this crazy time. And spirituality, well, that brings us to Jupiter. These days it is said that Neptune best represents the Piscean mysteries. But before Neptune was discovered, this was credited to Jupiter. Jupiter, in the older traditions, is said to rule Sagittarius and Pisces. And so we see Pisces in this kind of Neptune trident land coming together with Sagittarius and Jupiter. Astrologically, wild stuff is happening right now. Jupiter went direct today. Jupiter has been retrograde since November 6th, 2013, and this morning, I think around 8:40 a.m. Seattle time, Jupiter went direct. But recently, Venus was retrograde, and then Mercury. Shortly after the North Node moved from Scorpio into Libra, it only changes signs every year and a half. On March 1st, Mars went retrograde. On the 2nd, Saturn went retrograde. And then today, Jupiter went direct. And that's because Earth was either being passed by these planets or passing the outer planets. That's when we have retrograde apparent motion in the night sky. This slide is less confusing if I take everything away but the sun and the moon and the nodes. As I've said before, when we have a new moon or a full moon near the nodes of the moon, that's when we get an eclipse. And we're about to have a whole bunch of them, starting on April 15th, 12:30 a.m. So it's kind of April 14th, which is a Monday night. So we will see the full-on Earth shadow eclipsing the moon. And I might leave town for this if the weather tells me to, because I've never really watched a full one before. But we're about to see 4 lunar eclipses in a row. It's called a tetrad. It doesn't happen often. And if you want some wonderful entertainment, search tetrad in blood moon sometimes. This is what a full lunar eclipse is called, as a blood moon, because sometimes they look red. And you will find all kinds of biblical stuff around it. Because the last times this has happened, 1492, this was when the Jews were kicked out of Spain. The formation of Israel, again, centuries later. And then 6 years after that, the 6 Years' War, the taking of Jerusalem. So amazing stuff seems to happen with the Hebrew nation during these tetrads. And they do seem to show up in Scripture some. So it's very interesting now. Shortly after, we will have the formation of a grand trine. Last year it was Neptune and Jupiter and Saturn in these grand water trines. And this year, Saturn, Jupiter, and Chiron. So again, Jupiter and Chiron. So back to, wrong way. Back to that rock. And the big gas giant Guru. Also related by this constellation. Jupiter is very much associated with Sagittarius. Chiron is Sagittarius. And that is a special constellation. One of the only 2 astrological glyphs with arrows, Sagittarius the archer, and the tail of the scorpion, which point at a very special place in the night sky. They point to galactic center, the center of our galaxy, which the Mayans called Hunab, Hu, the great mother who creates us all. Right there, where the snake eats its tail of the Milky Way's Ouroboros. So in 2012, and for decades before, we've been experiencing galactic alignment when the winter solstice sun, the birth of the sun every year, aligns to this galactic center, aligns to the mother, the sun on the cross. And it's not the only effect of precession that the constellations will shift against the signs, so that galactic center, for example, will move into alignment with the equinox and solstice points, with the winter solstice every 26,000 years, it said. And during that time, too, the axis of the Earth changes where it's pointing in the night sky. So it's said to point now, in fact it does, at Polaris, the North Star. This is why it's the North Star. It's not particularly bright, that North Star, but it's where our axis points. So everything rises and sets around it. And you can watch this when we watch the north sky. So over the course of 26,000 years, the area where our axis is pointing in the northern sky shifts. And it changes all the way from Polaris, like times now, to Vega, this bright star you see approaching the middle point. Vega, one of the brightest stars in the night sky of the constellation Lyra. And it's said to have been most aligned to Vega 13,000 years ago and 13,000 years from now. We know about the seasons. This equinox we have coming up on March 20th, this will be equal day and equal night, when the axis is neither pointing away from or towards the sun, and we have summer solstice when the axis of the Earth points at the sun on the northern hemisphere, and winter solstice when it points away. That trip. So now look at where Polaris is at the top of the screen here, and Vega at the bottom. Over 13,000 years, the direction of the Earth's axis traces a circle between these two stars. Now when it's at Polaris, it is furthest from the Milky Way, the Great Mother, the ocean of spirit. And when it's at Vega, it's there. 13,000 years ago, 13,000 years from now, according to the accepted model. But they won't accept that at that time, and at the time coming, it will be a golden age on Earth. Which brings me back to the story of the Golden Fleece, and something I think we'll really look into next month, the Aries month, because Jason and the Argonauts is kind of an Aries story. But it also seems to be a story about this golden age. And interestingly enough, one of the things Jason has to do in the story is to wrestle these bulls and to harness them and have them plow a field. And well, on the other side from galactic center, at what's called galactic edge, the Milky Way crosses the ecliptic, the path of the sun, and therefore the constellations of the zodiac, between the horns of the bull and the Gemini twins, which isn't in the sign of Gemini now because of precession, but the twins, nonetheless, Castor and Pollux, well, they were members of Jason and the Argonauts' quest for the Golden Fleece. So here we have the bull and the twins. Winter solstice is aligning the sunrise to galactic summer, to the galactic center, and our summer solstice aligns right on the hand of Orion, right on the club. Looks like he's holding an ice cream cone. This is called the hand of the high man, according to some of the Western mystery traditions, a special time. And just below this place, we see Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. And near there, the Argo itself, the constellations that make up this massive thing, the Argo, which is sailing away from Sirius. But let's sail towards Sirius. I've talked about this. I'll certainly be talking about it next month if it doesn't make the world blow up. This is the coming Cardinal Grand Cross. So I've taken the other planets away and the music stops. It's a pretty intense alignment, this. And a lot of this unfoldment, this awakening, this shaking that we've been feeling, it maybe is coming to its peak. April 21st is the next exact Pluto-Uranus square at 1334 degrees, Capricorn and Aries, respectively. At that time, Jupiter will be at 1340 Cancer, and Mars at 1410 Libra, almost a perfect cross between these significant planetary players in the cardinal signs. And it holds for the week at least. There'll be energy before and after. And S1, there by Jupiter on the left, that is the star Sirius. So this whole grand cross is also aligning to Sirius, this brightest star of our night sky, this star so important to so many ancient traditions, this star of mystery. And if you want to find Sirius in the night sky, look for the really bright one. Or you can find Orion, which we know, and follow the belt stars down, depending on what time you're looking. And you will find this brilliant bright star Sirius, this star of great mystery. In this book, which is a very interesting reading, Walter Crittenden puts forth a theory that precession of the equinox is not due to some wobble of the Earth's tilt, as I've discussed before, but because we are in a binary star relationship with Sirius itself, the Sirius system. And if so, then this precession is speeding up at this time. And there seems to be some data that supports that. And many of us feel time speeding up. The day's not changing, the hour's not changing, the year's not changing, but why do we feel this? Maybe because I'm getting older? Or maybe because precession, this longest cycle, is speeding up. Maybe it's not 26,000 years. Maybe it's like Sri Yari Yukteswar, Yogananda's teacher, said, 24,000 years on the dot. And that it changes. And that when we approach the star whose orbit we dance with him, we are ascending, moving towards the golden age. And so Yukteswar put forth a model that he says is from the ancients that relates the awakening human consciousness to this cycle, this precessional cycle, this dance between Earth and its binary companion. And maybe that companion is just galactic center, Hunabku, but maybe it is Sirius. And we're ascending now. We're waking up. We're not far from that point where we were furthest pointed away, the winter of consciousness, and we are heading home. This book is amazing, The Sirius Mystery by Robert Temple. One thing I love about it is that Robert Temple is a member of the Royal Astronomical Society in England, the house of great nerds. So they can't just trash his theories like they do most alternative researchers, because he does bring some pretty alternative research to the forefront in this book, which very much traces entomological language study to Egypt from Mali, where the Dogon live. This tribe who an anthropologist in the 50s, a Dutchman named Marcel Brial, or some proper pronunciation of that word, lived with for a time long enough for them to bring him into their mysteries. And so we saw some amazing star maps that showed sun and moon and Venus and the pole star. Well, all the ancients had that, and had images like this. But this was something else. The Dogon knew the linear progression of the binary star system of Sirius, Sirius and A, Sirius B, to a T, decades before NASA did. They knew that Sirius B took 49 to 50 years to orbit Sirius A. They knew that Sirius B was small and one of the heaviest things in the universe. And indeed it is. It's a white dwarf. And they knew that there was a third star out there, Sirius C. And this is the piece of evidence that science has used to ridicule them for a long time, until it was discovered. Here's some Dogon drawings. Kind of rocket ship those. This is Nomo. Here's one from the Cave of Mystery of the Dogon tribe itself. Nomo, who is an aquatic, amphibious being who came here to civilize humanity, teach us everything we know. And he dropped from these strange ships in these ancient drawings of the Dogon caves. So what of these amphibious gods that we see everywhere? Here's a shot from Sumerian cylinder seals with fish people. Fuxi, the river god of China, who came from the rivers to teach us everything we know. Assyrian. Now, how about this hat, the fish head, versus this hat, the fish head? And how about fish heads, man? So let's talk about drugs. Because you often hear this about Pisces, right? I have a friend who went to an astrology talk, and I said, how was it? He said, oh, I'm a shaman and a drug addict. I said, are you? He said, no, missed. But there is this thing about Pisces and addiction sometimes. Why? I feel two reasons. Not from personal. I feel two reasons. One is when we cannot heal another as a healer. Sometimes we will take on their sickness to heal ourselves, to feel that we've healed them. And sometimes it works. This is a lineage thing sometimes. And sometimes, there's this reach for spirit, this true Piscean place, this connection. And we're so removed from it in this society until we find our way home. And when we are, sometimes we try to get there in every way possible. We will listen to 10-minute kind of wanking guitar solos in like Egypt hats and stuff. And that can be kind of fun anyway. But sometimes, we're stuck in that delusion because we're reaching for something higher, not knowing that we can tap into it anytime we wish. Sometimes we are so far removed from spirit. And usually, when that happens, the gods aren't happy. So Neptune, beside him, he's kind of a pissed off god a lot in the myth. Ask Odysseus about that one. But there was a time on Earth when humankind had lost reverence. We stopped leaving food on the plate for the gods, stopped paying homage and sacrifice and reverence. So what good were we? Zeus told his brother to raise the waters of the seas, and Zeus brought a never-ending torrential downpour to cover the world in water. It was buried to strike mankind from the face of the earth, and we all drowned. This was the time of the deluge, the great flood. All of the earth was buried in the waters of the seas, save for the lonely peak of Mount Parnassus, and all humans drowned except for two souls, ever reverent. So Zeus smiled upon them. These were Deucalion, the son of Prometheus, and his wife Pyrrha, daughter of Epimetheus by Pandora. So this brings us back to that story, which really, I think, reflects this light and shadow of Pisces, because Chiron, he gave himself empathically. Did he do this so he could reach the heavens? I don't believe so. So he did. Where Prometheus, all he had to do was apologize, and he would not. What was he protecting? His pride. And during that time, he was chained for 400 years. His creation, that he should have been protecting, was wiped out in this great flood. Except for two. Somehow it seems he was able to sneak a little message out. Build a boat, boy. So Deucalion did, and this crate crashed upon this peak of Mount Parnassus and outstepped these two souls, Deucalion and Pyrrha. And Zeus then pitied them, and the waters receded, and they walked down into an old city that had been covered in the weeds of the sea. Plenty of fish to eat. But they were the only two left, and they knew it. Well, ever reverent, they found their way to a temple to pray. This was a temple to the Titaness, Themis, and they knelt and spoke, though no prayer had been said there for many decades. And they heard her speak, Themis. She said, "You will reseed this earth." And as I fly on one of those pillars, I look over and I see Deucalion looking at his wife Pyrrha, and it's like, yeah, she's pretty hot, but seems like a tall order for two, you know? And he hears, "No, not like that. You will walk from my temple. You will disrobe. No, not like that. You will veil your faces. And you will throw the bones of your eldest ancestor over your shoulders. This is how you will repopulate your planet." Maybe the last sentence wasn't so sci-fi. Anyway, ever reverent, they did as they were told. They walked from this temple, they disrobed, they veiled their faces, and they puzzled this riddle for some time. I mean, even if they had the bones of their eldest ancestor, would this not be the most sacrilegic act known? They walked and they walked and they walked, and Pyrrha solved the puzzle. She said, "Deucalion, Gaia, Earth herself is our eldest ancestor, grandmother." And he said, "Yes, Pyrrha. And these stones are her bones." So they reached down and they grasped the earth's stones and they threw them over their shoulders, and those over Pyrrha's became women, and those over Deucalion's became man. And that's us, the stone people, maybe more connected to Gaia than we even know. Now, Themis is very exciting to me. My favorite goddess, maybe, Titaness. She was a wife of Zeus's before Hera. It's said that we're meant to pray to Hera in times of relationship distress, but I've never understood why, because Hera spent most of her life torturing the many, many, many women that Zeus found outside of their marriage, turning them into pigs and cows and having dragons chase them out of town even when they're pregnant. So all respect to Hera, and I'm sure your stories have only been told by people who didn't like you too much, maybe, but why would I give my prayers to like the crazy codependent woman in the time of relationship distress?
Don't be a crazy codependent woman. You have to study it.
Themis was married to Zeus before, and she split, baby. She's like, "Hey man, you want to sleep with the world? That's cool, do your thing, but not on my watch, I'm out." Yet she stayed on, always as a wise advisor to him. And she's said to rule over divine law and order, the rules of universe, and how we are meant to assemble, and diplomacy and worship and this kind of thing, which I feel is very Libra, and Libra is becoming more and more important, and we'll talk about that a bunch next month during the Aries talk. So Themis, this advisor, this counsel, this diplomat, she and Zeus had these daughters, the Horae, Dike, Eunomia, and Irene. Dike, justice, Eunomia, the rules, and Irene, peace. And so I would say that Themis was the embodiment of all three. She was peace before it needed to be blind, justice before the blindfold, probably before the sword too, but I couldn't steal an image like that because they don't seem to exist. And I believe that she is the very woman that Prometheus was speaking about in his great riddle that he gave to Zeus. One day a child will be born, strong enough to take the kingdom from the father. Not his father, not her father. That's not the way I hear it. And only I know the identity of the woman who will give birth, and I believe Themis is the woman who will give birth, because some say that Themis was the mother of Prometheus, and I believe Prometheus was talking about himself. But let's talk about tridents. What's up with this thing, right? Neptune, Poseidon, usually as a water god in fountains, even in landlocked cities. Here's a picture I took in Madrid in front of the Prada. And in Cusco, now that's not Neptune up top, that's Pacheyapec, the great Incan king. But down here, fish gods, and a city totally landlocked. And even Pacheyapek's weapon seems to have the semblance of a trident. Not far from there, Paracas, Peru, this ancient trident carved into the sand and has been for longer than we know. There's no winds, it never moves, 2 feet deep. And seeming like the tree of life, maybe. And there's some weird things about life in Paracas in general, skulls like this. But back to the tridents, how about Lord Shiva? India, Samaria, these tridents. At the bottom, this is a cylinder seal. These things are genius. This is why we have so many Sumerian tablets. Because instead of just leaving us tablets, which crack in earthquakes and such, they left these amazing stone stelas, these cylinder seals. So you can take them and you can roll them over wet clay still to this day, and you can produce a tablet. We have lots of these things. In fact, when we invaded Iraq recently, we got a whole score of them, and the archaeologists were sent in before the healers were. Babylon, double trident situation there. Fish heads and tridents, of course. Trident. What are these things? Well, there's this modern physicist, Anthony Barat, who has done a lot of plasma study. And he has found in his plasma science many of the ancient symbols that seem to be global. The trident included up top 2 images from Barat's experiments, and below many different glyphs of ancient tridents. He also found this one on the upper left, that's plasma, that kind of bald Kenny G looking number. Sorry I said that. And below, Kokopelli, and Coco in Africa. First of all, the similar name, both bent over this flute. Well, there's a bunch of flute players, but what about Squatter Man? One of the most globally known seen glyphs. This squatting man. Almost always with 2 dots on his side. What's with the dots? Well, in these plasma experiments, we get a toroid form. And if you take that 3-dimensional image and project it into 2 dimensionals, you get almost this perfect representation of Squatter Man. And so many have this theory that the sun was going off. Plasma everywhere. Turmoil in the sky, and that the ancients carved into their stones exactly what they were looking at. Maybe Shiva saw that. Maybe Poseidon saw that. How about this trident and a couple tridents coming out of the ears of the little baby Jesus? And well, Jesus, I hear he did the whole cross thing. There's a lot of Pisces in that sacrifice, and that empathy, and that bodhisattva. And we see this all the time, right? Jesus, the fish. Why? Because he performed the fish and loaves miracle? Maybe this seems to be a mythological discussion of when we shifted from the age of Aries to the age of Pisces. We're just at the end now. And whether you choose the Jesus fish or the Darwin fish, it's fish all around. Where's that come from? Well, this is the Vesica Pisces. And you can see the fish there. The Vesica Pisces formed when you take 2 circles of the same size and place the center of one on the diameter of the other. The space in between is the Vesica Pisces, and we see it all over the religious community. Here's Jesus with Leo, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, pointing at Aquarius. But usually it's associated with feminine aspects of spirit, because it's the yoni. So Mary is often seen this way. Go buy a candle, you'll know I'm telling the truth. And in Gothic cathedrals, especially in Ireland, but throughout the UK, we get this strange thing. Sheena Lagish. And people say, okay, it was a joke by the Masons. But here we have this kind of rude depiction of the Vesica Pisces, and maybe speaking to birth, to creation. And what would Jesus say about that? So, these fish, the Pisces fish, and this symbol, when you turn that symbol around, it creates a Vesica Pisces. And when you create a Vesica Pisces, you create some of the most important numbers of spirit. The square root of 2, the square root of 3, the square root of 5, all revealed in the Great Pyramid of Giza, all endless numbers like pi and phi. And some Egyptian mysteries say that I can't speak. And some say that these numbers are what the very nature of reality is created from. Hydrogen typically bonds as H2 in the formation of a Vesica Pisces. Binary stars orbiting each other as the Vesica Pisces. The Hourglass Nebula. Should have called it the Vesica Pisces Nebula, right? Nebula where stars are born. And what about when we're born from one of these? Before then, we kind of look like that. Long before then. The Vesica Pisces is formed when cells divide. And many relate this cell division to creation not only of organic people and such, but to the very nature of the universe itself. On the first day, there was the Vesica Pisces and such. Spirit first moved in every direction possible. Masculineness, straight lines, then connected the dots to bring about a tetrahedron. Sorry, an octahedron. And then that's just way too masculine. So, curved lines, the feminine. And from there, this.
Gonna take my case, gonna carry my case, gonna take my case away.
The flower of life. And then you connect the dots to bring the masculine back in to make Metatron's cube. And in Metatron's cube are all of the platonic solids. All of the building blocks of creation. And I hear the kind of stuff you see when you...
Take my cares away.
This is the star tetrahedron. It's said to be the human's energetic field, the Merkaba. This is the outline of a human. All right. And we're said to have these 7 chakras, right? Or 13 or 179. I made that last one up. A whole bunch of them. Here's not necessarily a plug because it's free, but I'm bringing together a group to celebrate the rebirth of Venus, who, from the shamanic astrology perspective of her 584-day synodic cycle, was recently reborn as Capricorn goddess. And it's this time now where Capricorn, the goddess, the grandmother, is meant to really return, and her voice will be heard. And there's a loose method I'm finding my way to of connecting to this goddess and to bring it into our own realm. And so I'm kind of bringing a circle together. It's not really going to meet that much. It's about at-home work. But maybe some phone talks every now and then. If anyone feels like doing that, let me know, and I'll put together some kind of Facebook group or something so Dick Cheney and our boys at the NSA can watch it all unfold. The flower of life, which is seen all over the place. This is in the Osirian in Egypt. And no one can figure out how this thing was carved into the stone there, because it wasn't carved, because you can't do that. And it's said that if you wear the material away, it's still there. Like it was lasered in by some kind of technology that we don't understand, which means it probably was not lasered in. We don't even know the word for it. China. Turkey. And I could show example after example after example, or I could show you Nassim Haramein. And I recommend you check out his work, Crazy Physicist. The Resonance Project. He's doing a lot of work with the toroidal field. Says that every cell in our body, every atom in our body is a black hole. So we got that to work with, that's cool. But shows how this flower of life geometry, when it's in its three-dimensional form, is the building block, is the foundation of all that is. In these 64, he relates to the I Ching. Scientology's down with it, you know? Here's some crazy underground bunker those crazy bunker people built to stash the great wisdom of L. Ron Hubbard. As seen from space, this New Mexico location, the Vesica Pisces. Oh, crazies in the White House too. How about this? The obelisk, the masculine, right in the center of the Vesica Pisces, Yoni. DC gets hot in the summer, you know what I'm saying? And so you can see this all over the place. One place I noticed it during my travels is in Cusco, Peru. And I just like to talk about Peru, so Machu Picchu. This is where I spent December 21st, 2012, with a backpack full of gear ready for the end of the world. I ended up not choosing that dimension for some reason or another. Still puzzling that one. But here we have this amazing, amazing temple constructed over the course of millennia. I don't care who says what. You can feel that there. There's much Inca construction, but there's older construction, older temples that construction is there to honor. Maybe even construction by Gaia, creator himself, herself, because here we see the human face laying on its back in the Andes float tank. Water. These fountains all over the Incan temples. You know, the virgin baths. We all like to keep our virgins clean. Were they just that? Always divided. This is at Tipon. Above that very fountain, Tipon, Peru. Tambo Mache. East of Cusco in the Sacred Valley. This is a Yante Tambo, and you see this in all these old Inca cities, the channel of water that runs. And it's an amazing way to deal with your irrigation, but maybe it's more than that. But the one thing I really want to show is that all of these always divide, come back together. And so I wanted to show this. This is a modern deal. You take water, you divide it into two streams. You send it through charged buckets or whatever. Then the streams have to cross, and it falls into other buckets that are charged in polar opposite. And if you have electrodes between the two, you will get sparks of 10,000 to 15,000 volts. Doesn't look that impressive. She's not impressed, but I really, really am. This is free energy. This is getting back more electricity than you put in. This is impossible according to the third law of thermodynamics and plenty of other laws, but not divine law, apparently, because people are building machines that represent the nature of the truth of this energy. And I don't think machines like that are brand new on this earth. This is the Temple of the Sun in Machu Picchu. Solstice aligned, by the way. And here are the amazing cascading, multi-tiered virgin baths, where the water always splits and comes back together and splits again. All that's missing is the PVC buckets. Or maybe they use something else. And maybe that something else hasn't stood the test of time like the granite and the stone has. Maybe, as I felt in my heart when I was at these places, those were energy devices. Or maybe I'm nuts. Well, I'm definitely nuts. But I'm very interested in that. Also in my travels, I went to this amazing place in the English countryside, about 45 minutes north, one way, of Stonehenge. Stonehenge is cool. It's a tourist attraction now. You're forced to walk around it the wrong way, magically speaking. It's difficult to truly connect to its energy, but at Avebury, you can put your hands on the stones, and they're massive. This is an old depiction of Avebury when it was still standing, because our Christian friends came and knocked it down. Found they could heat the stones and chill them and heat them until they broke or fell over. But before they got there, many of them were buried, and then they've later been reconstructed. So it's hard to say in its original format, but you can feel something special here. And that something that you're feeling is water. It's near many incredible sacred sites. Down here at the bottom, Silbury Hill, the largest burial hill. This is an overhead picture of Avebury, with some buildings removed and such, I'm just noticing. West Kennet Long Barrow, just on the other side of Silbury Hill from Avebury, is the largest long barrow. Supposed of course, burial places, but it seems like much more, and it feels like much more. And Silbury Hill, this great mystery which no one is allowed to dig into, because that'd be unscientific, is often home to these crazy things, crop circles. How about that one? Yoni. Here is a ancient cave depiction of Avebury. No. But this is to represent how deep the henge was around this place. I think it was 30 feet deep. How do you even get up there? And the thing about Avebury is that it runs over ley lines, subtle energy lines that trace underground subterranean water. We've just developed the science to actually see these things, which we do from space, but the ancients have known about it for a long time, and many of the structures, the temples, and the churches were built on these lines. I doused these lines, because I'm a hippie like that. When I was there, I hired this amazing woman named Maria Wheatley, and I recommend you check her out. And her dad was like the most well-known dowser, right? Someone who finds subterranean water. And so we went with dowsing rods. You have to do it with intention. And you cross these lines, said to be the Michael, the masculine line, and the Mary, the feminine line, where they cross twice here, and these stones run their length. And you walk over there with a rod and it twitches. And if you bring the rod up the stones, it will twitch in 5 places. I'm only tall enough to reach 3 of them. And these have been electromagnetically measured. These strange bands of energy, these stone temples were galactically, astrologically aligned, but they were much more than that. And these water lines seem to be so much about energy, ancient energy. The Michael and Mary lines dance across the English countryside, converge, separate and converge again at Avebury, and then later converge here at Salisbury Cathedral. Maria showed up for my tour with a driver, Busty Taylor. And I said, Busty, what? And he said, you know me? I said, yeah, dude, I'm a crop circle freak, because this guy was one of the first people to actually film crop circles from the air, so he's in all the old documentaries about them, which are actually getting old now. He took a liking to me, and he showed me something special in this church. We walked to the front of this amazing cathedral, where you can already feel the energy as you can in some of these ancient buildings. He removed a massive stone from the ground. He said, look down there. And when I did, I was blasted with spiritual energy in a way that I haven't felt before or since. And I had to sit on one of these pews and sit it out for a while. And that's when I became crazy. Pretty amazing. This is Freddie Silva's work. Freddie Silva actually kind of wrote the most scientific book on the crop circles, but he's been looking into these energy currents and measuring them with acceptable scientific devices, though his work is so scientifically unacceptable. These temples built to reflect the water beneath. Saqqara in Egypt. Designed to open the body's electrical circuits, he says. And this is, of course, why conventional scientists won't listen to a word that he does. But maybe that's true. The Great Pyramid is over amazing water lines. And this is Chartres Cathedral in France. It's usually terribly out of focus, I find. But not always. An amazing sacred geometry, amazing mysterious clues are hidden all over that building. But another thing that is there underneath is these subtle water energy lines traced in the labyrinth above. And here's a shot outside. That's the Jesus. That's Leo. That's Taurus. That's Scorpio. Now Scorpion. Once eagle. Once phoenix. That's Scorpio. And the angel over there, that's Aquarius. And he seems to often be pointing at Aquarius. Aquarius, this time now, this dawning of the age of Aquarius. Here's an interesting image of precession. That spot there, where the two lines converge, that is the autumn equinox. And when that point changes constellations over time, we change ages. So when it moves from the constellation of the fish, where it seems to be now, into the constellation of the water bearer, the age of Aquarius begins. And the problem with that is the constellations are all different sizes. I mean, massively different, right? Pisces, these two fish tied together, is gigantic. And right next to it, Aries, the warrior, the ram, looks like this tiny little phallus. Okay, that's not funny, but that kind of is. But the dawning of the age of Aquarius. When will it begin? What is it? Is there a date? Is there a calendar thing? We know the Sphinx, half man, half lion, half Aquarius, half Leo. Okay, mostly lion, but with a man face, staring straight at the eastern horizon, waiting to watch the vernal equinox sunrise, like we will have here in 2 weeks from today. Enter the sign, the constellation of the water bearer. Not the sign of the water bearer, because it's always 0 degrees Aries, but I digress. What will push us into this time? Is it just a calendar date? Or does it have to be brought forth intentionally, consciously? Is this something that we bring in spiritually? And how have the planets helped us? Chiron, shaman healer, when he ingressed into Pisces, the very day, Gulf oil spill. How is that shamanic healing in the waters? That doesn't seem like healing at all. Prometheus, who I say best represents Uranus, revolution. When Uranus ingressed for the second time from the waters of Pisces into the fires of Aries, that happened. In Japan, that happened. Fukushima. revolution, shamanic healing in the waters apparently doesn't look so pretty. When this guy drove his seahorses, Neptune, into Pisces, perhaps the time period started where we heal from this, where we use these awakening initiations to do just that, where we come together in spirit to heal this mess. But instead, 3 billion people watched Prince William get married. Okay. By a guy in a fish hat. What about that? Now, maybe it's not this freaky. Some would say it's not freaky at all. What's a Bictrill anyway? I can't even pronounce it. But is it coming here to our coast? Because this is what the inside of that nuclear facility looks like. That's a bad thing. And here's those infamous fuel rods that they have to remove, and if one touches the other, we're done and such. And we hear this terror, and there's a lot of fear around this, and why shouldn't we be scared? Well, because that's not how we fix it. And this probably isn't either. I'm feeling for these guys. You know, there's stories that a lot of homeless people are being hired to go work in this plant. You know, in like doctor scrubs? Cool. That'll do it. Nuclear fish, strange fruits and vegetables, dudes growing octopus arms. Yeah. No, that's an optical illusion. And probably something we shouldn't joke about. But is this part of this nature, this revolutionary, evolutionary time, this time of conflict and resolution that the Pluto-Uranus square brings in? And is there some spiritual gift in it? The Sphinx is looking for the age of Aquarius to dawn. Wake up, Sphinx. Wake up, humans. And so maybe these are initiatory events asking us to awaken, asking us to reconnect, asking us to remember that we are all one, and that this water in our body is connected to the water without, to the very water of the Seattle rains, and the Fukushima fallout alike. How do we wake up and heal this? How do we put the fires out? Here's an image of that water bearer, pouring the water onto the fish below. But I put forth the idea that the water is moving upward, ascending, transcending, that we will not truly enter the age of Aquarius until we are fully connected through Piscean oneness, empathy, spirituality, love, intent, consciousness. I don't believe there's some calendar date. I believe the universe awaits for us to awaken and remember who we are. And I believe that's exactly what we're doing, even outside of the float tank. It has nothing to do with the slideshow, but I couldn't ignore it. Hairless dog shaking water from itself, or maybe it does. And it reminded me of these guys. I'm gonna blow this. The Macaca fuscara monkeys. An island's off of Japan. Humans play this fun little trick with these monkeys. They love sweet potatoes, you know? So we gave them a bunch of sweet potatoes, but we rolled them in sand. And they hate eating sand. I do too. So many of these sweet potatoes went uneaten. until some young monkeys started figuring out that you can wash them in the waters of the ocean. This took a little time. But when it happened, it spread like wildfire. All the monkeys on this island started doing that. Sweet potatoes all around. And so did the monkeys on an island 50 miles away, though there was no interaction between these islands and their inhabitants. When these monkeys woke up, so did their neighbors. Works with humans too. This is an experiment that the BBC showed on television, because that's what the BBC does these days. Well, the television bit anyway. There are like 100 hidden human faces in both of these. I'm good for like 4. And I think 100 people that were tested were good for 6 to 8. Then the answers were shown on television. The original experiment was performed in Australia. The answers were shown on television in England. And then the test was given in Australia again to people who had not seen this television show. And results went up to 75 to 80. Like washing sweet potatoes. We can run around shaking people awake. I've tried this. It sucks. It doesn't work. Pisces is the dreamer, you know? And the sleeper dreams. So we're not meant to run around on a soapbox waking people up. Protect their sleep, protect their dreams, no matter how they're being caused and enforced, because we might have been there once ourselves. We wake ourselves up. We gather in community, and we sit with intention, with prayer, connection. And as we rise, so will the world. As we dawn, so will this age of Aquarius. Simultaneous invention. Here's another trip. So many of the great inventions of history, like calculus, right? Newton invented calculus. Well, so did Lagrange, but his name's not on any of the books, and he probably didn't get the big paycheck either. There's a theorem named after him, so that's cool. Hey, but Newton was the astrologer, so he deserved it. Simultaneous inventions. Look that up at some point. It's nuts. It's like when consciousness is ready, these things just blossom. Simultaneously, with people who never knew each other, never worked together, bam. We are in a time of simultaneous invention. I'm inventing astronauts. I went back in time and I invented Edgar Mitchell, because I knew he would be the Apollo astronaut who would later talk publicly about aliens and stuff. And it's kind of fun. Most of them like punch people in the face when you ask them if the moon landing ever happened and stuff. That's like the Neil Armstrong trip, right? Edgar Mitchell's on television like talking about the UFOs that he saw. And he's heavily involved with this Institute of Noetic Sciences out of Princeton. And one of the things that these folks do is perform experiments with random number generators. Okay? A random computer that spits out a random number. I don't know how random the computer is, actually, but the numbers are. So say it's 0 or 1, 0 or 1, 0 or 1, 0 or 1. It's going to be 50% over some amount of time. But when someone sits with it and consciously projects 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, when it starts moving towards the one side of the 50-50. And when 2 people sit, it moves further. And when 10 people sit, it moves very far. So one interesting thing that these people have done is to set these random number generators up around the world just to analyze the results and see if sometimes our consciousness somehow takes the results away from even. This happened in a big way on September 11th, 2001. And it happened before the planes hit the building. What does that say about our collective consciousness? What does that say about time? This is Masaru Emoto, who wrote this book, The Hidden Messages in Water. Because he found that when you speak to water, it has memory. And he showed that when you send prayer and love to water, it aligns in a certain geometry. The crystals actually change geometry. Thank you. I hate you. Usually he was more hardcore. It's like, I hate you, I want to kill you. And he did this with rice as well. So A is I love you. C, nothing was said. That's just rice rotting after several weeks. And B is I hate you, I want to kill you. But look at the rice that was loved. It keeps. Probably wouldn't want to eat it, but it's an amazing experiment. Is it because of the water in the rice, or does this work with plants too? Well, Clive Baxter would say it works with plants as well. This man invented the polygraph and worked for the Fed, lie detecting for some time. And then he got bored one day and he decided to lie detect his plant. Nothing really happened until he thought, I'm going to burn you. And then the polygraph freaked out. Sharp lines. The plant heard him. He writes about it in this book, Primary Perception. He writes about all sorts of experiments. He writes about how when some man came into the office one day, and by this point all the plants had their own polygraph connected to them, of course, and they all freaked out. And he's like, what the hell? Well, it turns out the guy was a gardener and kind of kills plants for a living. Trims them, shapes them, and the plants didn't seem to like that so much. He got on to forming a special relationship with the plant, as we will, and he found that when he would be in arguments with his wife, tens of miles away in Long Island, that the plant would register at the very same time. He later moved on to experimenting with spit, as you do, and he found that when you took a man's spit in a vial and polygraphed that, the man flew from New York to Los Angeles. I believe he got off the plane and injured his knee, and the spit registered real time. And we see this, of course, with electrons. You know, you change the spin of one and the other changes. I would like to sound more scientific when I say something like that. Maybe next time. What is this collective consciousness? What is this one mind? So we see these images a lot, how we're connected by our brains. But the Global Coherence Initiative, GCI, which is a really cool spot I recommend you check out. They do global meditations for every full moon, where you kind of connect in a chat room with other folks, and you drop in around a common theme in the world at that time. They're also starting to put towers up around that measure the electromagnetic resonance of Earth to see how human consciousness affects that. And so they can have these studies when thousands of people gather in these group meditations to see if there's any change on the electromagnetic spectrum of the entire globe. And they're starting to see some results. And last time we talked about groups that pray against violence, and significant decreases in violence happen. Prayer. Well, GCI is connected to the Institute of Heart Math, and they have shown that there is more of a resonance field, electromagnetic field, from our heart than there is anywhere else in our body, more than the brain. The gut as well, the will, the heart, the mind, mind, body, and spirit. So it's not this brain link that we all have. It's a heart link. We're all connected through love and through empathy. And when we get in that place of love, what they call coherence and gratitude, then the whole world around us experiences it. This is another experiment, I think by the Astrophysical Institute in Stuttgart, but pronounced correctly and with their correct title. They found that water has this other kind of memory, that every human has their own cellular signature that they will imprint onto water. So they would take water that had not been drunk by anyone, tested it, and all of the crystals looked the same. I think these aren't crystals, I think this is a molecule. And then when an individual specimen drinks, they put their imprint on that water. And so these are 4 different samples with 4 different people. Every sample from the same person looks the same. Every sample looks different between the different people. What is that? They later found that when we share water, it will take on the signatures of all of us. And they also found that you don't have to drink it to do this. So it's not just about the backwash. Last slide. This connection we have to water, and this connection of prayer. And what is it to pray to our food? Do we read some words from a book in gratitude? Well, that's cool. But what if we are actually reprogramming our food on its very cellular structure so that it agrees with our organism in a more healthy way? And when our organism is more healthy, so are the organisms around us, because we are all connected in love. Mozart looks pretty good. John Lennon's Imagine. Awesome. Love. Beautiful. Peace. Beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful. I will kill you. Not so pretty. Fujiwara water. Fujiwara. Polluted river. Before prayer and after prayer. How close do we have to be to these water crystals to shape them through our intention, through our love, through our prayer? What if we send a prayer to the oceans every day? Which each one of us does that. What if we pray to the water that we drink? And what if now we have a water blessing led by Sherry Herndon and pray together? So this will feel kind of like church, but it's not. And this is water crystal for thank you.
Thank you, Kris. Thanks for sharing with us.
All right. Sharing is caring. Yeah. Time to rock and roll. Super special thanks to Pepper and Moss, lots of love, to Sherry, and Kelly, and Nina, and to all of you.